My mom just happened to be passing. I just started jumping up and down. So like on the phone, I'm cool, but like in real life, I'm like jumping up. And she's looking at me like, "What is wrong with you?"
Welcome to Queries, Qualms, and Quirks, the weekly podcast that asks published authors to share their successful query letter and discuss their journey from first spark to day of publication. I am your host, author Sarah Nicolas, and literary agent Sarah N. Fisk. Sarah Das was born in Trinidad, but has lived in Tobago since she was 2 years old. She works as an office administrator by day and writes stories about the Caribbean by night. When she's not writing, she's reading or taking walks with her dachshund, Stella. Sarah's debut novel, Where the Rhythm Takes You, is inspired by her childhood spent in a seaside hotel. So please welcome Sarah to the show. Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah. Today we're going to talk about your journey to publication, and we're going to start by going back to the beginning. So when did you first start getting interested in writing? And then how long did it take from there before you started getting serious about pursuing publication?
My interest in writing goes back so far. I can't even like say a specific point. With stories in particular, like my father used to read bedtime stories to me when I was really young, and I'd memorize them. And like he was so impressed by this, he used to make me recite them from memory in front of family and then friends and like parties and stuff. And I used to really enjoy that. But, you know, after a while, I'd end up like forgetting bits and pieces. So I'd fill them in with my own version of the stories. After a while, I just started making entire stories up on the spot. I can't imagine doing that now. Like, that would terrify me. When I was younger, I used to really enjoy that. And eventually, I started writing them down. I started doing what is now, I guess, considered Nancy Drew fan fiction because I used to love those books. I used to devour them, and I used to run out of books to read. So I ended up just writing my own version, so you know, entertaining myself. And so those were like my first writings. For a long time, though, I never finished anything. So I'd like start projects and then sort of leave them at like 40,000 words, 30,000 words, and never move past that. And this went on for years up till about I was done with university. And that's when I really started writing for, you know, with the aim of publishing, really like buckling down. Because I suppose, you know, real life is right there. No more school. Just like now or never. Yeah. Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the moment that you realized that you wanted to be a published author and also what you thought that that might look like for you?
Again, I don't think there's like a specific moment, but I can tell you, I don't know if you've ever seen this movie. It's horribly dated and just honestly, it's not a very good movie. It's called Alex and Emma. So it was a Kate Hudson movie. It's really terrible. I do not recommend it. But the main character in it was a writer, and it was really about he's a writer and he's on a deadline. Like seriously, he owes like the mob money or something like that. I can't remember exactly, and he needs to submit his draft in 30 days. So he hires a stenographer who's played by Kate Hudson. I think it was Luke Wilson actually was lead, if I remember correctly. The way he did it, he basically just narrated the entire story to her, which is obviously like ridiculous. Like that would never work. But he just made it look so fun. And I was already interested in, you know, writing a book at that point. And so I thought, oh, so this is what you do. You just start at the beginning, end at the end. It goes quickly. And of course, that's
so easy.
Yeah, it's easy. Yeah, but that movie just made it look a lot of fun, and I thought that that's what it would be like. But obviously, having actually written a book, I know it's not that worth.
That's funny. Written several books now.
Yeah.
So once you started getting serious about pursuing publication, how did you learn more about the publishing industry, like how it works, how to query, how to go about everything?
Yeah, so this would have been like early 2010s when I was first like researching stuff. So a lot of it was like Tumblr, Tumblr stuff, or like I found Query Tracker, and I thought that was really useful in terms of like looking up agents and like what genres they represented and what they were looking for. Even before I'd written, finished the book, I was like planning out who I'm gonna query. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it was just basically a lot of online searching and looking at what other authors said about it. There was also, I think, is it the Nelson Agency? I think that's who, yeah. She had like a blog online where she used to like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. I used to read that like a lot.
Was it Pub Rants? I think hers was Pub Rants,
Was
right?
that it? Yeah, it might be. Yeah, it's been so long now, I can't remember. But yeah, all of that, and no book actually written yet, but already planning. You know,
Nice.
later on, when I was actually in the quarry trenches and so on, then it was like by that point they were like podcasts, and that it was available. So at that point, I started branching out and learning a bit more. But for the most part, it was just like those early query tracker kind of comments in the comments. Yeah.
Hmm. Can you break down for us your journey from getting serious about publication to signing your first book contract?
Like I said, the book that was written with the aim for publication. Oof. Okay. So this is a bit embarrassing, but I'm gonna go for it. So this book, I call it my learning book because honestly, I did learn how to write from it. I learned how to finish a book. I learned how to revise a book, how to share it with other people, other writers, how to take feedback and then how to use it. But that book, oof, um, uh, it was a new adult science fiction with strong dystopian and romantic elements, and it was like over 120,000 words.
Mm.
So, for a literary agent, that's a lot of red flags for a debut, especially. Especially back in, so this would have been 2015, 16, at the end of the dystopian.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that had already passed. It's a lot of red flags, but like I loved that book. I was like convinced that someone was gonna just read it and they're gonna recognize how brilliant it is and they were gonna love it. Looking back now, I'm like, ooh, that book. Oh, thank goodness I did not debut with that book. But at the time, I was really confident in it, and I sent out. I tried to check to see exactly how much. But the email that was with that query tracker, I've lost it, so I couldn't see exactly. But I know for a fact it was over 100 queries
Mm.
on that one. And also, it wasn't just it was also multiple rounds. So I had queried as a new adult book, but then after some revision, some feedback, I had gotten it down to under 100,000 words, and I made it young adult.
Mm.
So I had done like a different querying after and all that, I'm including in the 100, but like it did not do very well at all. And like understandable, like, I'm not embarrassed that I tried because I think that even though you're like stepping out of the box for a book, if you really believe in it, like still try. But like go into it with the mindset that this is likely not going to work. And you have to know that going into it. But at the time, I did not go into it with that mindset. I went into it with like somebody's going to recognize that this is brilliant and they're going to love it. So of course, I was really disappointed when the rejections started coming in. But as we were coming down to like the last few rejections, like I saw that we were past 100. It was coming down to the last set. I knew, okay, this book is not working. So what I did was I started a new one, and those rejections really like lit a fire under me because I ended up writing this book and revising it within 4 months,
Mm.
which is the fastest I have ever written anything. I've never written anything that fast before, and not afterwards. But another factor that really like drove it was the fact that it was a contemporary book.
Mm-hmm.
Not only was it a contemporary book, it was a contemporary book that I had set in my home country, like in Tobago, a young adult book. I ended up using a lot of stuff that I was familiar with, and the entire experience was easier, but also like a lot more fun. Um, so I don't know. So something sort of clicked. And I sort of felt like, I love writing other genres as well. I love reading other genres, but contemporary is my favorite. And I think right now that is what I was supposed to be writing.
Mm.
And it just felt right. So yeah, 4 months really quickly. And I queried it. And the difference was amazing to me because I ended up getting way more full requests on that one than I did on the first one. It was almost like, I think it was like 48%
Wow.
full requests. It's like almost half. Yeah, so it was way different, very different. But even though it was getting like good like request rates, I was still getting rejections. And a lot of the feedback I was getting was like, we love the writing, we love the setting, but the plot's not holding up. So I knew I was going to have to do a revision. And around this time, what should come about but pitch wars? It was like perfect timing, actually. And the thing was, I wasn't even going to enter. I almost let it pass because I had entered the year before with the other book and got nothing. So I was like, do I even want to put myself through this? I'm already getting a lot of rejection. Do I want more? Why am I inviting more into my life? But on the very last day of the entry window, I was like, okay, you know what? Why not? And I'm so glad that I did because I honestly do think that that sort of changed the entire trajectory of my writing on the road to publication. Honestly, I think that made a huge difference. And honestly, like, I know it's no longer around, and like that hurts because I really do cherish that experience. And I was so lucky, I think, to have been a part of it. So I worked with a mentor who helped me like give me feedback and advice, and we revised the book. It was with Lizzie Dent, who is an amazing writer, very funny. She gave me a lot of advice and really like held my hand through that part. And we went. There's an agent showcase where agents request if they want to see it or not. I got I can't remember exactly, but it wasn't a lot because this was like the year of like Children of Blood and Bone and all these like Serpent and Dove and like all these big splashy books.
Oh,
So comparatively speaking, my quieter young adult contemporary didn't like make a huge splash, but I did get a good amount of requests. All of them said no. But what I also did was after I sent that out to them was I also queried other agents, including those that had requested the full before I had done the pitch wars revision. So I had asked them like, okay, so you were interested in the full before. Do you mind? Are you interested in looking at it again now that it has been through a pitch wars revision? Be very upfront with it. Don't try and sneak it in like a new book. Because agents, they're looking for novels, so just be upfront with them. A lot of them did actually agree to look at it again, including my now agent. So I sent it to her again, the revised version. I always had a good feeling about her, like, because she sent me in the initial rejection, she had sent me like the nicest rejection letter like I've ever read. It was very thoughtful, and I could see like she got the heart of the book and what I was trying to do. And it was just really nice. And so I remembered her, and I was really excited to try and see if she would be interested in the new version. And she was. And then I remember it was like a couple weeks later, I knew exactly where I was. I never forget. I was in a workshop for my day job, a special workshop they were having, and I was like zoning out a little bit, honestly. But and all of a sudden this notification came up on my phone, which is sitting on the desk, and I saw her name pop up, and I was like, oh no, because I had the feeling, but I was like, literally sitting center right in front of the teacher. So I had to like control my like emotions. I didn't want to make her think that I wasn't listening, so I'm like staring straight ahead, like, yeah, I'm definitely listening to you right now, nothing else is going on in my mind. And it went on for like a really long time. I think it was like 2 hours more I had
Oh
to
gosh.
wait. And then as soon as it was done, I opened the mail, and she wanted a call, and I was so excited. I was so excited about it, because I was like, like I said, I had a really good feeling about her, and I was really happy it was her specifically had reached out. So we scheduled a call, and while we were on it, it was, I'd say it was more of a, I, it was not an offer right away.
Mm.
It's a little more complicated. It wasn't a revise and resubmit. So it was something in the middle. The situation. She was like, we had to talk about the book, what she liked, what she didn't like, and then we started talking about possible changes that could be made. And she actually made a suggestion. She's like, the romance in the book sort of reminded her of the one in Persuasion. And she was like, have you ever considered, writing a retelling? And I had, but like not for Persuasion specifically. Um, and of course, I do love Persuasion. It's one of my favorite books. So I was excited she even brought it up. And we started talking about like other retellings, like When Did Rishi, and like what we liked about them and so on. By the end of the phone call, we agreed to have another one about a month later after I'd had time to sort of think about the changes and so on. So we did. So I did. I hung up the phone. I thought about it for a bit. A couple of days later, all of a sudden, like these ideas started coming. And I got really excited about the idea of a Persuasion retelling in particular. And I knew like I wanted it set in a hotel. I wanted the ex to be a musician. I just started getting all these ideas. And I don't think my agent knows this, but even before we had that second call, I had already started writing it because I was so excited about it. I was like, this idea is brilliant. And then I started really connecting with the character, and it just started coming really easily. When we did have the second phone call, I was like, okay, so this is what I'm thinking. If we're gonna do a retelling, we're doing a full retelling. So it's like a full rewrite. We're gonna use the setting, the character voice, and but I'm gonna really change the story to be a retelling.
Mm.
And I laid it out for her what I was thinking, and she was like, she got as excited about it as I was, and she's like, I love this. I think I know exactly the editors for this. I'd like to sign you, and that is that's how I got and that's how I
Nice.
got signed. Yeah, so I was excited. I was literally like, at the time I was on the phone call with her, I was like walking around the house and talking because I was like, I couldn't be still because I was so excited about it. And
Mm.
when she said that, my mom just happened to be passing. I just started jumping up and down. So like on the phone, I'm cool, but like in real life, I'm like jumping up. And she's looking at me like, what is wrong with you? So yeah, and that's how I got my agent.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. And then, in terms of the journey to publication, I worked on the book for like a year and a half.
Mm.
My agent was like giving me feedback, and what I loved was really she and I have really good, like, similar taste, which I think is really helpful with an agent. Like if you like the same things,
Mm.
and I think she's got a really good eye for character as well. So that's really helpful to work with her. Like I learned, this is another learning book as well. I think most debut books are. Um, I learned a lot writing it. It's a year and a half. By the time I finished it, it was just about summertime in the U.S. Yeah. So we were a little hesitant to send it out right away.
Mm.
We'd heard, I know I'd heard some stuff about, like publishing slowing down in the summertime. And Wendy was like, my agent, she was like, she really believed that the book would sell quickly. And she didn't want a situation coming up where we had an auction or something, or like we had to do like a deadline, and then some editors were on vacation,
Mm-hmm.
because then that would be a problem. The irony of this is, when we went out in September, a lot of the editors were still on vacation, so it didn't really end up mattering. Anyway, but she really believed in the book, which is good to have, because when you're going into submission, you're like a ball of nerves. Like it's and just to have somebody who's very supportive and very on your side, and like giving you the information you need, is really helpful. So we went out in September. I think it was like the first week ish. Can't remember exactly, but it was early September. Within like 2 weeks, we got the first offer,
Mm.
which which is amazing, because like honestly, I was convinced it would be longer. Like my agent kept telling me, like, don't worry, you don't worry, you'll get an offer. And I was like, you try to manage your expectations. You hope for the best, but it's like you hear a lot of stories, and like I was prepared to wait.
Mm-hmm.
And so it kind of blew my mind a little bit that someone had read it so quickly and had already offered on it. And that sort of kicked off an auction sort of situation. So when we got that offer, my agent reached out to all the other editors and was like, okay, there's an offer if you're interested. you gotta, feel free to jump in. So I'm assuming she phrased it better than that. Um, and strangely enough, in mid-September, I also went on vacation. So
Oh.
so I don't know what was going on. It was 2019, so this was like before everything happened. So
Mhm.
vacations were still a thing in different countries. So I went away. I visited my sister. She was in Texas at the time, so I was staying with her for a little bit. So all this was going on while I was on vacation. The auction itself, I remember it was really the situation itself is already like really surreal. So being on vacation just made it so much weirder
Mhm.
because like at certain points I was like taking calls like, you know, in a museum because it was like we were already supposed to go at the time and all of a sudden I had to like talk to my agent like behind a sarcophagus, like in the corner. Like, so it was really weird. But yeah, so we went to auction and like I mentioned, some of the editors were on vacation, so we had to like wait a little bit longer for it. And it ended up going till like about mid October, I want to say.
Mm.
Yeah, so honestly, for me, it had been one of the most exciting experiences related to publishing, but it was also one of the most stressful
Mhm.
because so I had to speak to all the editors before we went to the actual auction, just so I could feel them out, hear what they thought of the book, what sort of revisions they thought it could use, and like what their plans would be to promote it and so on, all that. And I had to sort of hear them out. And these are people who've worked with some of my favorite authors and for all these like these big houses and like with work on best-selling books. Like so it's a lot, especially for me who I've gotten a little bit better at it just because I've had to do all these promotions for the books. Like I don't like talking on the phone and stuff to people. I was really nervous at the time. My agent really she was on the calls with me, so that really helped as well. So like if I like got too nervous and forgot to ask something, she would like jump in and sort of help with that as well. So we talked to all of them, and auction day came about, and I think I was like, it was most of that is a blur because I was just so nervous the whole time. But in the end, we did end up going with Donna Bray of Balza and Bray, HarperCollins.
Oh.
Yes,
Mhm.
she's just an amazing editor. I think that she's worked with some really great people like Angie Thomas and Becky Albertalli. So I was like, that alone, I was like, wow. I will say though that like if I had gone with any of the other editors, I think I would have been in good hands as well because they were all like really talented. I feel like they really got the book. But I am happy with Donna. I think that she really understood the heart of where the rhythm takes you, which I hope you guys have realized that's the book I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I forgot to mention it. Yeah, so that book in question, which is now my debut novel, Where the Rhythm Takes You. So that is how I got my editor, and then May 2021, Where the Rhythm Takes You was published. Yeah.
All right. It is time for the first cue of the podcast. Can you read your successful query letter for us?
Okay, I want to preface this by explaining that this query letter is not for Where the Rhythm Takes You. It's for the book that got me my agent, which I then worked on, Where the Rhythm Takes You with. I also want to say I recognize this is not a very good query letter looking back at it. It's fine, especially because I think I didn't include this part in it because this is the first version. But I did change to add in a part about the pitch wars later on, and I think that also helped, get people's attention later on. But okay, I'll stop stalling now and I'll stop stalling and read it for you. I submit for your consideration Exora Drive, an Own Voices young adult romantic contemporary set in Trinidad and Tobago. It is complete at 74,000 words. The loser who said it was better to have loved and lost never got publicly rejected, and definitely not in front of the gossipy community of Madarine Bay, Tobago. If heartbreak and humiliation taught 17-year-old Raina anything, it was to steer clear of the handsome boys next door. Since then, Raina's clawed her way to the top of her class, caught in a cutthroat competition for a scholarship at her dream school. Sure, she has no life outside her books, but at least she's not the school's laughingstock anymore. But When Reina's old neighbor returns to Tobago, reviving old rumors and feelings she worked hard to keep buried, Reina will learn there are times to play it safe and times to risk it all, including her heart. Exora Drive is a standalone novel that will appeal to fans of To All the Boys I've Loved Before and Jenny Han and Lola and the Boy Next Door by Stephanie Perkins. I have an MSc in Crime and Forensic Science. My days are spent working as an office administrator, but my nights are dedicated to crafting whimsical stories about growing up and living in the Caribbean. Thank you so much for your time and consideration. I look forward to hearing from you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that.
Thanks.
So, how has your experience been since signing your contract? Especially, were there any surprises along the way?
One of the biggest surprises was just the amount of people that read your book before it's published. Like, I remember very distinctly, like, somebody in the publishing house that, not the editor, but somebody else had complimented the book, had been on the phone, one of the phone calls, and they'd read the book, and I was like, how many people are reading this book? Like, it's a weird feeling, because I think that, when you're first querying and so on, you have like a certain control over who gets the book, like your beta readers and so on. Who's reading it. But then after a while, it gets a life of its own, sort of. Even more so now that it's published. But I think that first sort of, I don't even know who's reading it sort of moment, sort of like that freaked me out a little bit. And the number of people who worked on it to get to publication, like how many copy editing, that was actually, like, I think the biggest eye opener, and also like my favorite part of the process. Just like looking at, like, they're brilliant people. Like, honestly, they catch the little things that I hadn't even couldn't even begin to think of or notice, in the book. That experience especially was very eye opening for me as well.
Yeah. It is time for our quick round. I call it author DNA. It's just categories that we like to put writers in. Are you a pantser or a plotter?
Both, but I lean towards pantser now. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you tend to be an overwriter or an underwriter?
Over. Way over.
Do you prefer to write in the morning or at night?
Night. Yeah.
When starting a new project, do you typically start with character or plot or concept or something else first?
It goes concept, plot, and then character. Yeah. It comes back to that original question about the plotting or pantsing. I would say that I plot plots and then I pants characters, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you prefer coffee or tea?
Coffee. Yeah, I have a problem. So.
When writing, do you prefer silence or some kind of sound?
Silence. Yeah, I can't work with any kind of sound, really.
When it comes to the first draft, are you more of a get it down kind of person or a get it right kind of person?
Get it down and get it down as fast as possible.
What tools or software do you use to draft?
Word. I have Scrivener, but like I've had it for like 2 years, but I'm so intimidated by it. I haven't used it yet.
Do you prefer drafting or revising more?
Revising, particularly like the last set. I really love the sort of, and making the language sort of pretty and tidying up. I like that process. The first part's like too much, like too nerve wracking for me sometimes. Yeah.
Do you write in sequential order or do you hop around?
Always sequential. I cannot imagine hopping around. I don't know how people do it.
And final quick round question. Are you an extrovert or an introvert?
Introvert, yes. Yeah, definitely.
So the show is called Queries, Qualms, and Quirks. We already heard your query, and now we're going to talk about the second Q. What were some of the worries that you had on your journey, and were they realized, or did you overcome them, or how did they shake out?
So in terms of worries, I think like there's a common stuff, like imposter syndrome, just like, am I good at this? Has somebody made a mistake? Are they going to like change their minds at some point? Like that, it's the constant, it's still there. It's still a worry that I've had. There's also this sort of fear because I'm writing from like a very marginalized group. You don't see a lot of Trinidad and Tobagonian books published in America. So there's this sort of fear that, the people reading the book, this might be their only exposure to Trinidad and Tobagonians. And that I think is terrifying because like there's so many different stories here, so many different experiences, so many perspectives. I don't want mine to be like the only one that people take away from it. But I do hope that reading the book sort of, sparks curiosity to like check out other Trinidad and Tobagonian or Caribbean authors as well. Because there's such a range here and, so much talent. And yeah, I just don't want to be the only one. And that is very intimidating. You don't want to get something too wrong. The only way I really like it's still something I deal with, but for now I'm sort of, going with the mindset of, doing the best I can, listening to feedback and sort of just being as honest as I can within my experience.
Cool. And now it's time for the third cue. Do you have any writing quirks? Is there anything about your writing process that you think is kind of different or interesting or unique?
When I get stuck, I like to walk around a lot. So like I literally like family members have like seen me like walking around and muttering to myself. It's probably because I'm trying to work through something. I do a lot of walking around and talking to myself sometimes, and startling people. Like I have my dog Stella, who you mentioned in the bio. Um, she'll walk around with me. She'll just follow
Oh,
me around the house. Like, what are you doing? What's going on here? And she'll just walk after me.
yeah. She's like, where are we going?
Yeah,
Oh, just back to the living room.
literally.
Okay.
Like, oh, we're in a circle. Okay, all right. So let's keep going. And and the thing is, she'll just do the whole time with me, which is so
Oh,
cute. It's really cute. Yeah.
yeah. When you were in the lowest parts of your journey, what kept you going and why did you stick to it?
The lowest part in my journey, I very distinctly remember a very bad night I had. It was just after Pitch Wars, I think, maybe a couple of weeks after. So it was like when I was started getting rejections again after Pitch Wars.
Mm.
And it sort of felt like, okay, so I'd gone through this entire experience and like it still, it wasn't working. And that made me like really upset. And I had a really bad night and where I was like, I'm done, I'm giving up. But then, I got through the night and the next morning came and the next morning came and it got easier, and I kept writing. And sort of, you know, anytime after that, anytime now, I sort of start doubting myself or like feeling like upset about, my writing or something with publication, I sort of remember that night. And I remember that that feeling did pass. And knowing that that feeling did pass is what lets me know that, this experience, this will pass as well.
Mm.
Yeah.
What are some of the biggest mistakes you feel like you made along the way to publication that you might want to warn listeners about so hopefully they don't make the same ones?
Okay. So I talked about my first book. I don't consider it a mistake. I just want to say I don't consider it a mistake, but I will say I think I spent way too much time on it. I think, finally letting go of it and writing that next book, that is what pushed me forward. And I think at a certain point, you have to just look at what you're writing. If it's not working, and just work on something else.
Mm.
Even if it, you think it still has potential, maybe take a break from it and try something else. My writing also improved once I started writing books that I wanted to read
Mm.
specifically and coming at it from that mind frame. Like, would I be interested in reading this concept in this book? Like, what about this would appeal to me? And would this keep my interest? And looking at it from that point of view, really, I think changed the way I approached books as well.
Nice. Can you share with listeners one of the most important lessons that you learned on your journey to publication?
I think just finishing things, I think, is my biggest lesson I've taken away from it because for years I just would not finish anything. I would get like either distracted by a shiny new idea or just like lose steam, like lose confidence in what I was working on. Like, I'm wasting my time on this. Let me try something else. And it wasn't until I finished a book and kept finishing books that I knew that I could do it and kept doing it and I got more confident in it. So I recommend whatever you're working on, if it's a short story, if it's a novel, whatever you're working on, a poem, finish finish stuff, and revise it and work on it. And I think that's the best. Yeah, that was the biggest takeaway I had from all those years.
Yeah, that's great advice. So, I call this the acknowledgments portion of the podcast. This is not a business that most of us succeed in completely on our own. Who are some of the people or even organizations who helped you along the way and how?
So first, I just want to mention my agent because Yeah, she's been amazing, very supportive, really believed in me the whole time, which, I think is really valuable to have someone behind you.
And what's her name?
Wendy Goo. Yeah, so anyone interested in querying her, you've got my approval. And Donna, my editor, been great. Everyone who helped with the debut book, all the publicists, everybody in marketing and sales, they've been amazing. They really, they got the book, and like I really appreciated that. And then, even back to Pitch Wars, everyone who was involved, like my mentor, all the author friends that I made, all the organizers, like I'm eternally grateful for that experience. Also, my debut group, a bunch of amazing authors, and like, so supportive, not just like sharing resources or, experiences and so on, but also just supporting each other. Like they've been amazing. I definitely recommend, debut authors join a group. So it makes the process so much easier.
Since we heard about your book that never really got published, can you tell us about Where the Rhythm Takes You before you go?
Sure. Where the Rhythm Takes You is a young adult contemporary retelling of Jane Austen's Persuasion, and it is set in Trinidad and Tobago specifically, because it's where I grew up. 17-year-old Reina gets a second chance at first love when her ex-boyfriend Aiden returns after a couple years abroad, during which he's become a famous musician. But now he's back, and he's staying at the seaside resort that Reina's family owns and where she works. And they reunite, and old sparks reignite.
Nice. All right, Sarah, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your story with my listeners.
Thank you for having me on. It's been fun.
Yeah. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Queries, Qualms, and Quirks. You can find the text of Sarah's query in the show notes, along with links to find out more about her and her books. If you enjoyed the show, I'd really appreciate if you'd help me find new listeners by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or Podchaser, telling your friends, or sharing this episode on social media. If you're interested in supporting the show, go to patreon.com/pubtalklive. And if you're a published author interested in being a guest on the show, please click on the home base link in the description or go to sarahnicolas.com and click on the podcast logo in the sidebar. That's Sarah with an H and Nicolas with no H. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.